Will an engineer, aka Space Jockey, appear in the upcoming Alien Romulus? Originally, the origin and purpose behind the Space Jockeys was left mysterious for a period of 33 years between the first Alien movie in 1979 up until 2012. During this time, a lot of extended media, mainly comic books and novelisations, would attempt to open up and expand upon the Space Jockeys themselves. This was until the previous two Alien movies, namely Prometheus, dove into their backstory and revealed them to have a distinctly humanoid form, rather than how they were perceived before as being a biomechanical species, as the Jockey and the Derelict looked like, half organic, half machine. But this was instead revealed to be a suit the actual creature was inside, rather than being its actual body. Also, they were given an official name of engineers, replacing the previous unofficial title Space Jockeys. So how could an engineer be included in Alien Romulus, and would it make sense for them to do so? Well, not much info about the new movie has been unveiled as of making this video, but if we take a look at the Alien Romulus page on the Xenopedia wiki, under plot it reads: the film, an original standalone feature based on the original sci-fi horror movie released in 1979, will follow a group of young people on a distant world who find themselves in a confrontation with the most terrifying life form in the universe. Romulus takes place in 2142, between the events of Alien and Aliens. Most of the film takes place on the space station Renaissance. Many of the characters are siblings, whether it be through blood or as surrogate siblings. Romulus takes place in the era of the first film. This is represented on screen with the technology present being the same, or at least similar to that in Alien, whereas the technology seen in Aliens is on the cusp of being developed. The film is designed to be accessible to those who have not watched any prior Alien films. Its level of connectivity to said films has differed between sources. According to Collider, Romulus will have no connection to any previous Alien film or the TV series. According to Alvarez himself, however, connections to other films aren't ignored, specifically mentioning Alien and Alien Covenant. So going by the articles and interviews this page is referencing, it seems that the new movie will have some connection to the previous films, only loosely, but not outright ignoring them. So it would seem they aren't entirely retconning the two prequel movies. But with it being set after Prometheus, Covenant and Alien, it may reference them, but obviously not anything from Aliens or onwards, or Alien vs Predator. Also, seeing as this text says it mostly takes place on the space station Renaissance and not entirely, then could that mean perhaps that maybe could the Covenant be found by the crew members of the Renaissance? Perhaps if they detect it and then maybe dock with it and board it, could that maybe lead them to discovering David's experiments and how he creates the xenomorphs, and then that leading them to the engineers somehow? If you saw Alien Covenant, then you may be thinking, hey, wait a minute, I thought David dropped the black goo on the engineers and wiped them out. How could they still exist in Alien Romulus if it's set after Alien Covenant? Well, it is said that the inhabitants of the planet in Covenant aren't actually engineers, but rather another race created by them, just like humans, as evidenced by their differing appearance to the engineers from Prometheus. The beings in Covenant looked more like halfway between humans and engineers, rather than actual engineers, as well as their civilization looking nowhere near that of even humans, let alone engineers. Except for the docking module, but that doesn't match the surrounding structures, so could easily just be some technology left behind by the engineers. Also, if you look at the way they react to the engineer ship, it's as if it is out of the ordinary, and like they are excited because they think the engineers are returning, who they likely worship. Kinda like in AVP when the ancient Antarcticans worshipped the Predators. So a little bit more on the engineers themselves. Also known as Space Jockeys, engineers were an ancient extraterrestrial species of unknown origin. They possessed some of the most advanced technology in the entire galaxy, with special emphasis placed on their skills in genetic engineering. Credited with the creation of humankind, engineers were believed to have been beneficent creators of sorts, who sailed the stars terraforming primordial celestial bodies and sealing them with the foundations of biological life. As such, they were revered as gods by the species they created. In appearance, they are extremely pale humanoids and closely resemble humans, but are readily distinguished by their hairlessness, high nose bridge, raised brow ridges, extreme height and larger muscle mass. The veins underneath their skin are visible and their eyes are black. They are highly sophisticated and possess technology centuries ahead of mankind, and are even more advanced than the Algae. They are extremely advanced in spaceflight and genetic engineering. The planet LV-223 was a research planet used by them, and was where they were experimenting with the black goo, an extremely potent and virulent mutagenic pathogen consisting of millions of microorganisms. It was designed to act in a dual role, to create life forms and also to act as a biological weapon. Due to its volatile nature at ambient temperature, the engineers housed the pathogen within special containers. Those affected by the mutation were subject to violent mutations. The principal theory of their connection to the xenomorphs, which was mentioned briefly by Ridley Scott in his director's commentary for the first Alien DVD, is that the engineers' ship in Alien was a bomber and that they used them as biogenic weapons to fight an ancient war against an unknown race. There is some evidence to support this, such as the xenomorphs' biomechanical nature. Xenomorph eggs were believed to be used as bombs on an enemy planet, and then the xenomorphs would proceed to kill the entire population as they spawned. In Prometheus, it is known that a lone engineer was responsible for the creation of the human race. He sacrificed himself as his people left the empty Earth, drinking chemicals that dissolved him and changed his DNA to the planet's first microorganisms. Humanity would eventually develop from this sacrifice, making the engineers the ancestors of the human race. As such, human DNA and engineer DNA are virtually identical. The lone engineer's reasons for doing this is unknown, though it seems his race did not hold any positive regard for their descendants. Dozens of cargo ships carrying the weaponized black liquid were set to launch for Earth to release the pathogen and let it wipe out humanity, only to see the engineers somehow lose control of their intended weapons and perish. The crew of the US CSS Prometheus believed that the abandoned planet they explored was an outpost for weapons engineering and development, lending credence to the theory that the engineers created the xenomorphs. It was also noted by the crew of the Prometheus that the engineers on LV-223 had been dead for around 2,000 years. This had led fans to speculate that up until about 2,000 years ago, engineers were on good terms with humans, but a specific event occurred which caused them to become hostile towards humanity. This explains the cave drawings inviting humanity to track them down. So despite the consensus generally being middle to negative towards Prometheus, I in fact actually really enjoyed the film for what it was. That being said though, story-wise talking about the Alien franchise as a whole, I prefer the idea of the Space Jockeys being the half organic, half machine, as we all thought they looked like in the original film, as opposed to them being giant humanoids inside a flight suit as depicted in Prometheus. Do I personally think an engineer/space jockey will appear in Romulus? I would say no, I don't think they will, as they look to be going back to basics, kind of like how they did with Prey, and I don't think they'll want to weigh down the story with a load of baggage carried over from the prequels, even if they don't actually dismiss those films outright. Would I myself like to see an engineer in Alien Romulus? Again, I would say no, as I'm more of a fan of the idea of them just being mysterious and left to your imagination. The same way I prefer the xenomorphs to be a natural species as opposed to them being created by David or the engineers. So as always, I hope you enjoyed this speculation theory video, and make sure to let us all know what you think in the comments. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.